कैसे हैं?
किस तरह है?
नमस्ते।
Привет.
Ciao, come stai? Kulbieda. Hallo, Kakosi.
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Hello, my name is Mike Kulbieda, and this is a presentation in defense of my thesis entitled Foreign Language Acquisition, Factors and Strategies that Promote and Hinder Success. I chose this topic because I currently work at the International School of Frankfurt in Germany, and I'm amazed as to how the students at this school are so multilingual. The student population is made up of kids from all corners of the world, including Germany, and all the instruction is done in English, which is the native language of only a small percentage of the student body. Most students here speak 2 or more languages, being English and whatever language or languages they might speak at home with their parents. Experiencing this firsthand has really made me curious about how these students are able to acquire more than one language and succeed academically learning content through that second language. Therefore, the purpose of this study was to determine what factors promote and hinder successful acquisition of foreign languages, in addition to what educational strategies support multilingualism. So, language is an exceptional tool. We use it to express ideas, emotions, pass on knowledge, tell stories, tell about memories, and as the world becomes more globalized as a result of economic, demographic, and political changes, it's going to be important that future generations are multilingual. Even in the USA right now, there's a huge population of immigrants who speak more than 300 different languages. That number is rising, as well as the numbers of our limited English proficient students in classrooms, which is rising at a rate of about 60% or more, according to the National Clearinghouse for English Language Acquisition. So classrooms have and will continue to become more and more linguistically diverse as time moves forward. Now, this has great implications for teaching, as educators will have to be better prepared, more qualified, and also promote and encourage students to participate in the multilingual classroom. Now, unfortunately, there are some things going on in the USA that indicate a need for change in the attitude and policy towards language learning. First, there's a lack of opportunity for language learning in schools, especially in the lower socioeconomic areas. Under 1/3 of the nation's elementary schools offer foreign language instruction, and right now high school students are only getting about 150 hours a year, a number that's far too low to lead to any substantial amount of success. There's also the debate over bilingual education. There's a majority population that support programs to limit the presence of non-English languages in public schools. So this social resistance is impeding our ability to provide future generations with the linguistic skills that they'll need to be successful, as well as culturally aware citizens. Multilingualism has its benefits, academically, socially, and professionally. Understanding what contributes to and hinders the successful acquisition of a second or third language will ensure that we as teachers are able to manage the challenges in these ever-changing classrooms. Also, we can encourage our students to master another language by just providing them the opportunity to do so. Now, this study was guided by 3 questions. First was, what factors influence students to acquire a second or third language? Then, what hinders successful acquisition of a second or third language? And what strategies can be used to encourage second language acquisition? Now, from the literature came 4 recurring themes: motivation, attitude, cognitive factors that lead to success, and strategies that can be implemented in the classroom to promote bilingualism or multilingualism. First, I would like to talk about motivation. Now, Kulbieda and Chen in 2005 defined motivation and language learning as the target language learner's orientation with regard to the goal of learning a foreign language. Based on the studies that I reviewed, there's a variety of motivational factors that influence the successful acquisition of a foreign language. One common theme in the research was the relationship between instrumental and integrative motivation. Instrumental motivation is associated with a pragmatic purpose for learning the target language, whereby students will study harder to get good marks on their tests. Whereas integrative is more of a personal effort to learn because of a desire to get to know the native speakers of the target language and simply just the want to learn something new. In a study done by Engen in 2009, showed that both types of motivation are prevalent among language learners. However, integrative motivation was more closely related to high success rates. The students in this study were more focused on learning the language for their own benefit rather than trying to please their parents or other figures, which is very common with instrumental motivation. One example of integrative motivation is a study by Rueda and Chen in 2005. They took a group of Asian heritage students learning Chinese. They were more motivated to learn Chinese as a way to connect with their own culture and communicate more with their family members. These students also displayed instrumental motivation as a result of parent expectations to learn the language and to achieve high scores in school. This is common in Asian cultures as there's a huge amount of emphasis put on getting high test scores because essentially the scores allow them to get into a good university, which allow them to get a good job, which increases the family wealth and the status of the individual. Working in a school in South Korea, I was able to witness this firsthand, and through talking with my students and their parents, it was obvious that there is a huge emphasis on test scores in these cultures. Culture in itself is the next factor that came up in the research associated to language learning. For example, Chen, Warden, and Chang in 2005 found that Taiwanese students were more instrumentally motivated based on their culture of competitive testing and rigorous studying. The study sought to determine whether the lack of exposure to the target language would influence learning success. But despite what you might think, in Taiwan it was found that a lack of exposure to the language actually had little or no relevance to the amount to how well the students were able to learn the language and be successful. This is because students were not interested in having conversations with native speakers. They were more interested in studying the books to pass the test and get a good grade. In contrast to that, Landvers in 2002 studied British students and their motivation to learn a second language, and found that there was a lack of interest to be bilingual because there was extremely low expectations to learn a new language from both the school, the society, and their families. Low desire and expectations are common in English-speaking countries because studies done in America and Australia as well show that students who speak English as their first language for some reason are a bit less motivated to learn a second language. Simply because I think of the idea that English is the universal language and most people will be able to speak with you if you are traveling abroad or doing business. Now, another key element to motivation is the teacher. The teacher has the power to motivate students through lessons and support. A teacher who creates interactive, interesting lessons is going to achieve better results, whether it be the foreign language classroom or just simply a classroom full of ELLs. Now, studies from the research, in particular Cayuzo in 2006, showed that high teacher expectations in an engaging learning environment motivated students far more. Now I'd like to discuss the influence of attitude on foreign language acquisition as it's closely related to motivation. Attitude towards learning a foreign language is something that greatly impacts a person's ability to master another language. Attitudes are generated by a number of factors, including culture, society, socioeconomic status, education, and most of all, parents. A negative attitude creates a negative perception towards the language and decreases motivation to learn. One example of this is a study done in the U.S. by Taha in 2007, who looked at both American students and international students learning Arabic as a foreign language. Now, in the U.S., Arabic is considered to be a critical need language, and there are few Americans that are taking the steps to learn it. Americans were found to actually have negative perceptions of the Arabic language and lack any kind of enthusiasm to study it, even though it would mean being more competitive and marketable in a very difficult job market. Another study done in Britain showed that British students have a poor perception of French and were reluctant to learn it despite what advantages it might provide them down the line in the future. Like I said before, native English speakers seem to have this tendency to believe that because English is so universal amongst travelers and business associates that it's not necessary to become proficient in a second language because everybody will speak English. It's that attitude that hinders their ability to become bilingual. Now, another factor related to attitude is socioeconomic status. One example is what I mentioned earlier in the introduction about the lack of foreign language instruction being available in urban schools around the U.S. Immigrants and refugees coming from countries that may have a lack of educational value based on their simple need for survival and to work leaves them without the necessary tools to know how to study and how to learn a new language. So in turn, they end up becoming isolated within their own linguistic group, and that limits their opportunities to find solid work and support the family. And the parents of these children coming from such backgrounds are really unable to provide the type of support at home that the children need in order to successfully acquire the target language, in the U.S. being English, or in any other country just being the native language of the country. So parents have an enormous amount of power over the attitude of their child towards education and language learning. The school setting is also related to students' attitude. Schools that are culturally aware and support multilingualism will provide students with a greater opportunity to make connections to their own culture and learn about others with an open mind. 1998, Abu Rabia conducted a study that showed how Arabic students attending a school in Israel where instruction was in Hebrew. They did super poor because the curriculum lacked any material that pertained to Arabic students. The students need to be able to make a connection to their prior experience in order to gain a better understanding of the material being presented, especially if that material is being presented in the learner's second language. These are all important factors to consider as a teacher looking to promote success in their language learning students. Now I'd like to talk about the cognitive factors that contribute to language acquisition. There are many interesting cognitive factors that can enable successful language learning. By understanding them, we can better be equipped as teachers to alter instruction based on the cognitive abilities of our students. Also, by knowing which strategies affect these factors, we can maintain a classroom environment that enhances the learning experience. One issue study by Link, Kroll, and Sunderman in 2009 involved inhibiting the L1 to eliminate the distractors associated with it in order to mentally make a shift of the focus to the L2. This was found to be best accomplished through full immersion or study abroad, where the student is completely immersed into the linguistic culture over an extended period of time, when compared to traditional classroom instruction. Students who are forced to use the target language in and out of the classroom have a greater opportunity to become more fluent and acquire more vocabulary based on their pure necessity to learn it. This concept is difficult to achieve in normal classroom instruction just because of the limited time the students will be immersed in the foreign language. But foreign language teachers can still use this knowledge to do their best at making sure that their lessons involve as much speaking and interacting using the target language as possible. Also, bilingual programs such as the two-way immersion program, which I will go into more detail later. Even though they receive much criticism in the U.S., they're a great middle ground between this traditional classroom instruction and sending your student away on a study abroad program. Now, interestingly, music ability was found to support language learning success. Interestingly, but not so surprisingly, musicians are constantly engaging in the coding and decoding of notes, which in itself is essentially a different language. Language acquisition also requires a trained ear for comprehension, much like a musician who hears notes and then is able to repeat them. Age and gender also influenced language acquisition based on the research. It was suggested that children under the age of 7 are not inhibited by making mistakes, which give them an essential tool in language learning, which is confidence. They have no fear of being embarrassed or saying the wrong thing, so their level of practice and fluency becomes much higher. 2010, Pesnick said that cognitive demand of what younger children must know is quite low, which makes it easier for them to really build the necessary foundation that they need in order to transfer into more complex language in the future. As far as gender is concerned, females were also found to possess greater skills in language ability in a study by Kissow in 2006. However, the study was done in Britain and the target language was French, which was found to be perceived negatively by male students, so that may have had an impact on the results. Regardless of age, people still can possess different language learning strategies and abilities. An early study by Hull in 1979 showed that there are separate components of language ability, including the control of grammatical and phonological skills. Also, strong receptive skills leads to better vocabulary acquisition, which allows for more productive use of the language. Basically, the more vocabulary a person can pick up, the more fluent and confident they will become in their speaking. The last main theme in the research was strategies that can be used to promote foreign language acquisition. Now, taking into account the motivational factors, attitude, and cognitive abilities of the students, knowing different strategies and programs to implement is important as the next step towards promoting multilingualism. The first strategy or program that is extremely effective is the two-way immersion program, or sometimes also called the dual immersion program. This program has gained popularity in some states around the U.S. and has been used around the world to promote language learning amongst elementary age students. Now, it's an incredibly effective program, and basically what they do is they usually start out with 90% of the instruction done in the target language or the second language, and 10% of the instruction would be in the native language. In the U.S., it would be English, so they would have 90% in Spanish, for example, and 10% in English. The classrooms are typically divided into native speakers and non-native speakers to kind of create some sort of cultural connection between the two groups. So the goal is not only to promote bilingualism, but it's also to promote cultural awareness. Now, there's a lot of resistance towards this program, as people tend to think that students will be missing out on important content knowledge by learning in their L2. But from my experience teaching in a similar style program at the International School of Frankfurt, it's not the case. My students are able to manage and maintain positive results even though they're learning in their second language. Research has also shown that content knowledge can be easily transferred from one language to another once the student reaches grade 5 or 6. Another type of program is study abroad programs that have been extremely successful for learning a new language. Dewey in 2008 found that 3 different settings, study abroad, intensive domestic immersion, and formal language classes, out of all of those 3, the study abroad produced the best results by a long shot. As mentioned earlier, while immersed in the linguistic environment of the L2 over a long period of time, it's easier to build vocabulary, fluency, and confidence in speaking. The vocabulary acquisition alone was far greater in this study with the students studying abroad than both the intensive domestic immersion, something like the two-way immersion program, and formal classroom instruction. Almost all of the research discussed vocabulary acquisition as a key component to language learning. It's a simple formula. The more words you know, the easier it is to access them in conversation. So by building your vocabulary, you're going to create a sense of fluency that you wouldn't normally have if you didn't have that vocabulary foundation. Now, reading plays a huge part of learning new vocabulary. Therefore, it's important to make reading strategies a primary focus for language learners. Some examples from a study by Suits in 2003 include repeated readings, read-alouds, using culturally sensitive materials so students can make connections, and incorporating students' background knowledge. This is super important. Students need to be able to make connections to their own knowledge in order to make sense out of the material that they're learning. Other things like the use of visual aids and hands-on materials to create meaningful context are extremely important. One final strategy that was found in a study by Van Aken was computer-assisted language learning, or CALL. Now, this is a computer-based language instruction in which students take frequent quizzes on the computer related to the target language, vocabulary, grammar, spelling. This study was done in Australia with students who were learning Japanese. And feedback from the students said that it was extremely effective because they received immediate results. As soon as they took that quiz, they were getting their scores. So they found it rewarding and interesting, and as a result, increased their motivation to really master the language. All of these strategies are important, not one more than the other, but all of them can be used to promote foreign language acquisition in the classroom, both amongst language learners of a foreign language or language English as a second language. Bisseth in 2009 said that proficiency in more than one language facilitates interpersonal, academic, and social communications, expands intellectual horizons, and encourages the appreciation and tolerance for different cultures. The ability to speak more than one language provides many advantages, and as educators, the awareness of all four factors related to foreign language acquisition provide the foundation for promoting multilingualism in society, and all of them are interrelated according to the research. Motivation affects attitude, and attitude influences success. Also, knowledge of cognitive factors that enhance linguistic ability can be used by educators to implement appropriate classroom strategies in district-wide programs. The issue of bilingual education continues in the U.S., but from the studies I reviewed, it can be concluded that multilingualism is both beneficial and achievable. Regardless of the arguments over ethics and patriotism, the fact is that the population of non-native speakers in classrooms is increasing, and teachers must educate themselves on how to best facilitate the needs of a diverse group of learners. We as teachers have the ability to create well-rounded, open-minded, tolerant citizens who get excited about the world around them and all they can learn from it. With the tool of language, they will have a better chance of taking advantage of every opportunity that comes their way. And that's really the goal of education. Thank you very much.